There's a line in a Jimmy Buffett song that I'm thinking about today. Something to the effect of the best navigators don't know where they're going till they get there. And then some of them still don't even know. I remember once back in the early 2000s when I'd done several trips back and forth to the Caribbean. I was on the dock one day in the fall and someone looked at me and asked me if I was going south again that year. I looked at them. Mind you, I was all of my early 30s at this point. I looked at him and said, "No, I'm taking this year off. It's way too much work." I think that's about the time people stopped talking to me on the dock. I'm not sure. Anyway, my point today is that solid truth, no kidding, very often I am outside the harbor and pointed somewhere before I know exactly where it is I'm going. Pre-COVID, when I was more into restaurants, I had a similar foible in that I would always pick two things off the menu. So I'd be ready if one of them wasn't available or for some other reason I had to switch gears in a hurry. Here in Buzzards Bay, and particularly Padenham Harbor, where I call home, we are particularly blessed with a reliable southwest summer wind, and sometimes a little west-southwest like today, sometimes a little south-southwest. But within that wind direction, usually 10 to 15 knots in the summer, you've got a whole bunch of different places you can go. You can point up on a southerly heading for Quick's Hole, as I think I'm going to do today, or you can crack off a little on a reach for Hadley's at Woods Hole, or go through Woods Hole, head over to the vineyard. But the point is, I don't make that decision until I actually get out here and sniff the breeze. Yeah, there are days when I'm going to meet up with someone somewhere, and then you take what you get. Days when you make the decision where to go before you know what you're going to get on the way. But most of the time, one of the greatest advantages to me of being a single-handed sailor is just like I don't have a large consensus vote to take about what's for dinner, where I decide to go for a particular outing, it's kind of off the cuff. Now, I'm not saying that every cruise has to be spontaneous, and I don't mean to imply that there's no fun in planned group cruises. Those things can be great. But I will say that one thing any professional sailor will tell you is that the most dangerous thing on a boat is a schedule. And I think that we have a tendency in our everyday lives to want to have everything planned out, hour by hour, day by day. And very true that for most people, realities are that you have a schedule you have to adhere to in real life. But I will say that it's a lot more fun to reach than it is to beat. I think sometimes the flexibility is what makes single-handing and already living on the boat, already being packed for your weekend because everything you own is here. I think you have to do a little of this kind of spontaneous cruising in order to make that pay off for all those days that it's a compromise living in a tiny space or having to carry water or generate power. This is the flip side. These are the days that pay the bill and make it all worthwhile. Mind you, there is planning involved. I'm not talking about voyaging now. That's a whole other level. This is your weekend outing I'm talking about, or your day trip. You do want to do a little planning before you go. It's nice if you take into account the wind when you plan to go and the day you plan to return. Very often you can walk to school downhill both ways, so to speak, if you do that right. After you've been in this for long enough, your herd tends to be the funky people that are doing the same thing, and you don't really mind so much that you don't know who's going to be there when you get there. Now today, for example, just happened to have a a bit more west in the southwest. And I happen to know that if I were to head down a woods hole and take this as the beam reach that would send Charis screaming at her top speed, it'd be a wonderful trip across Buzzards Bay for 14 miles. A lightning quick run through Woods Hole where the current will be running at least 3 knots in my favor. And then a pretty quick run across Vineyard Sound up to Vineyard Haven. However, that same current would oppose me if I decided somewhere along the way that Tarpaulin was going to be the destination rather than Vineyard Haven. And I learned long ago that you don't fight the current in Vineyard Sound. It's just not worth it. On the other hand, I've got wind angle, albeit close hauled, to make Quick's Hole. Still have a fair current, 1.5 to 2 knots there. Then a fair current all the way eastbound down Vineyard Sound. And I'll preserve the option, should I decide I don't want the hustle and bustle of Vineyard Haven, to just stop off at Tarpaulin Cove and make that the day's destination. Well, out here in open Buzzards Bay, south of Round Hill Point, looks like the gamble's paying off. Wind has, in fact, gone a little west of southwest, so we're on a nice, easy, somewhat close reach, laying the line for Quick's Hole, making an easy 6 knots. As it always does, once you clear Round Hill, it freshened a bit out here, so I did have to roll in a bit of mainsail to keep her balanced, but right now the wind vane's steering her very nicely, and we're on track to make Quick's Hole in less than an hour, and then fall off and run down Vineyard Sound for what I expect is going to be a very pleasant broad reach to run, with at least a couple of knots current added to our boat speed. So all things considered, I think this was probably the best choice for today. And then there's always the chance that that beautiful breeze that's pushing you along at 6 knots down Vineyard Sound will peter out. And even if you didn't know where you were going when you left and you thought you knew where you were going halfway there, you might just decide to go somewhere else. And if it looks like this, well, pretty hard to be upset about ending up in a place like this, but note, no rental moorings. No rental moorings and no crowds. Gotta love it. Thanks for sailing along with me today. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I did. I know I'm going to enjoy the evening here.